Hi, guys. This is Dr. Sabrina Smith, and I am back with another webinar for you guys today. Today's topic is going to be building relationships and understanding ethics in educational interpreting. Um, as you learned in the previous workshop, if you have looked at that workshop, if not, I'll give a little brief summary of who I am, and you probably saw the introduction video that I created as well. But I am Dr. Sabrina Smith, and I am here in Virginia, and I've worked as an educational interpreter for um, quite a long time, almost 20 years. So today's workshop is going to be about building those relationships and also how we can think about ethics while we're doing that. This actually is a 6-hour workshop, so I'm kind of giving you the highlights of it. And then maybe one day I'll be able to come there and present, or come to wherever you are and present the workshop in person, which is one of my favorites because I do love educational interpreting. So we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to have this next slide. I usually have this slide in most all of my workshops, not always on the webinar workshops because we're not working together in a sense of we don't have to communicate or interact. However, I left it in this one because we're getting ready to talk about the relationship in interpreting in the educational system, and we need to be mindful of each other and each other's needs as we're working every day. I always tell people at my workshops that it's a safe environment and to be careful how we address each other. And that holds true for the working environment. When we're going to work, there are going to be times when we are met with adversity, or there are going to be times when things just pop up that are very frustrating, or we don't like what somebody else does, or a team might do, or another coworker in the building might do. And we need to remember that there are different personality types in this world. And just because someone isn't my personality type doesn't mean they should be any less respected. So we have to take into consideration if someone is an introvert or an extrovert, or how they like to approach things. And as well, they need to take those into consideration for us too. So we want to continue work with this workshop in a safe environment, or this webinar, but remember to take that with you as you go into the working field every day and you go out into the school system. So we're going to start today with agreeing to disagree. There might be some things that I mentioned today that uh, you're not going to necessarily agree with. You might think, oh, well, no, we don't do that, or no, I'm not going to do that. But what I want to do is I want to challenge you to think outside the box, to try something that someone else may have tried and failed, and then learned a different way, and it caused them to succeed. So some stories that you're going to hear today are my own personal stories, and I don't mind sharing my raw experiences that have definitely caused embarrassment, and I can admit wrongdoing if it helps someone else realize, you know what, I don't want to make the same mistakes that Dr. Smith made. So I definitely don't mind sharing those. And so keep an open mind when you do hear things that you don't like. Um, and think about how it might work for you. I do not claim to have all the answers. What I am sharing with you is definitely School of Hard Knocks. I share with you not only my experiences, though, but in my travels and in my working with other people, I've collected their shared experiences, and those are experiences that I'm sharing too, because I've learned from other people's mistakes. So I'm hoping that some of the things that have been helpful for me will in turn be helpful for you as you move through your career and you move further along in educational interpreting, or just interpreting, period, anywhere. It doesn't matter whether you're freelance interpreter or an educational interpreter. This can apply. So let's get right into it. How to start off your year right? Well, if we're building relationships with our coworkers, and I say coworkers in the sense of everyone that we come in contact with, as educational interpreters, we will come in contact with administration, the teachers in the room, the teacher of the deaf. It could be occupational therapy, speech therapy, the assistants that are in the room. So we want to make sure that we put our name out there. We want to meet each teacher or each staff member personally. Um, put a face to that name. Let them know who you are. I know that many of you are out there working and you feel like you're invisible. Trust me. I can't tell you how many times I've been called to the office in a school which I have worked in almost an entire year, and then I get to the office and they'll go, "You had some mail here. I are you Dr. Smith?" And yes, I am. "Oh, well, you have mail." And they kept telling me you were here, but I didn't know that you worked in this school. An entire year had gone by. I mean, come on. So I try my best, even though they will forget, I try my best to go in and meet the office staff. I tell them I'm an interpreter in the building. I just meet as many people as I can to put my face out there. I meet I custodians, the lunch workers. I mean, I try to just meet as many of them as I can so they know who I am. And trust me, it can come in handy when you meet the custodians because they know me and I'm friendly. And then if a kid throws up in a classroom and I walk out that door and go, help, they might get there a little quicker. Not that that's my job to do that, by the way, but sometimes all the teachers are running when a sick child pops up. All right, so another thing you want to do is get books needed for the course. Now, I realize nowadays a lot of things are done with technology. And so even kids in our school right now, they have Chromebooks. All of them were issued Chromebooks. So all of their classwork and coursework and stuff is on that website or on that classroom that they have online. So there's a couple ways that I have learned. I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks, and that would have been in my early days, walking up and saying, "Hi," and still in a nice way, "Hi, I'm Dr. Smith. I'm going to need this book for the class." And the teacher's saying, "Oh, we don't have enough books to give out to all the students, so we can't give you one." And then me in turn saying, "Oh, I have to have a book. I have to prep the material beforehand." And them, of course, saying no. And then me saying they have a right to access. And it just, you see where it's going. That banter, it's frustrating. I'm trying to pull out rights of children. And so then I turned my approach around later because I didn't like the way things were going. So I started going up to teachers and I would say things like, "Is this the book for this class?" And they would be like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this book is so heavy." And they're like, "Yeah, it's a pretty big book." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can't believe I have to carry this around all year." And which in turn would cause them to ask a question. "What do you mean you have to carry that around all year?" And then I started in with the education. We actually have to preview each chapter before you teach it so we can know what vocabulary, what signs to use, and be able to match so that they can get, complete access. And by then, the teacher is feeling sorry for me and signing the book over. And after I changed my approach to them, they changed their approach to me. And I never had a hard time getting things. Even at the beginning of this year, I went up to the teachers that I was working in their room, and we are issued now the Chromebooks, the Chromebooks that the kids are issued, we will get one as well. We worked long and hard for that, and that's one of those things that you have to show relevance for if your school district does not give you things like iPad. We started with iPads, now we have Chromebooks. So if you don't have those, you have to, that's one of those things you have to keep pushing for. And ours was just these type of scenarios. All their work is on, all their handouts and everything is in the course room now. So I did go up to the teacher and each individual teacher and I said, "Hey, every time you guys teach, is it okay if I get the lesson, on the lesson plan or something beforehand?" Because, and same thing, we have to have all the vocabulary. And then I casually would mention, or I noticed you are inviting them to a course room. Is there any way I can get an invite to that classroom? And then I could just look at it every time you post it. Well, that's easier for them because they got to post it for the kids. And instantly, I got an invite to every single course room in the high school that I'm working at now. So I have instant access anytime I want to go in and look at test reviews or whatever quiz they're taking. I can prep things and it's very nice. So remember, sometimes it's how you ask for things, and that's going to be how you get things. Also, any other material that might be used. We know that there tend to be staples in some schools of what they're going to be using at that time. For example, I know that in our school district, every year, ninth grade is going to be Romeo and Juliet. So I always double check at the beginning of the year and say, what are we doing? You know, Romeo and Juliet, it tends to be, I think 10th grade is A Raisin in the Sun. We have, I think Macbeth comes along junior year, if I remember correctly. But ask the teacher what big topics they're going to be going over that year. If it's an English teacher. Because what ends up happening, if you're getting involved with something like Shakespeare, we realize that that's going to be more in depth and that's going to take more planning on our part. So if I can ask them at the beginning of the year, hey, do you guys in your curriculum have a particular book like Shakespeare or something that you use this year? And they're like, oh, yeah, you know, in the spring we'll be reading Romeo and Juliet. Boom, I can start now. That's perfect. Perfect. Um, so there's a handout that I give to people when I'm at the workshop, and you guys don't have it, but I will do my best to make sure that um, I send that to the. You're actually going to see it as we're working together today because I'm going to be going over it. So you'll be able to see what's on that handout. But if you actually want a copy of the handout, then I will make sure that you get that. I will try to also make sure that you get my email, and that way you can contact me anytime you want. I will have that listed somehow on the webinars for the person that's commissioned me to do these. I'll get them to put all my personal contact information on there. So we're going to go over those later, but it's a handout that you can give to teachers to basically explain your role and what you do and what you're responsible for, and it helps them know exactly how to approach you. It puts us in a limelight of I am a profession of my own, more so than I am your teacher's aide, and we can knock them out of that right away. Um, let them know you're going to need a workspace. A lot of us move around as educational interpreters, and even if we are in one school for a year, the next year it doesn't guarantee that we're going to be there. So I always tell them that I'm going to need a space in the room, possibly a desk, maybe if they have like a student desk even, or at the minimum, we're going to have interpreter chairs that are specifically designated for us so that we can be there during off time, or when when we're teaming, the other interpreter will be monitoring from that area. Excuse me. So those are the things that we want to ask for when we go in, and let them know that you're going to be sharing a space with them. Um, I tend to do that when I meet a teacher each year. I'll say, hi, I'm Dr. Smith, and I hear we're going to be sharing a space together this year, to let them know that there's not necessarily a hierarchy in a room, but everyone is in this together. The same as a teacher's aide should probably do the same thing. We all are working together on a team for these students, so we need to remember that. Remember, you are the expert in your field. Sometimes we let people take that power away from us when we are working, and we think I'm just the interpreter. And we joke about that, but we are the interpreter, not just the interpreter. I am the interpreter and I am the expert in my field. So, another expert in their field, such as a teacher of the deaf, or um, somebody, the teacher themselves, they can't like come and tell me how to do my job because they're the expert in their field. I'm the expert in my field. But part of the problem is we don't always own that. So we have to own that, and we have to speak accordingly, not rudely, but accordingly. This is how this is how we do it when it comes to language issues. And the more we are able to do that, the more respect that we're going to gain as we move through as we move through our work with other people. All right. So let's go into, speaking of that, interpreters and teachers of the deaf. Remember, we are not opponents in a ring. Now, sometimes it feels that way because there are teachers of the deaf that have been in the past and still are in some school districts put in charge of the interpreters. And that can be problemsome if the teacher of the deaf, I've known teachers of the deaf who are very fluent in sign language. So but they're not hired in an interpreter role or they're not in an interpreter role. So then they might try to step on the toes of the interpreter and that becomes problematic. So we have to be aware of that. We want to make sure that our roles, we keep them defined. And I have basically said to people before, I certainly wouldn't ask you to come in, and interpret, or I certainly wouldn't step on your toes and come in and try to teach English to the deaf student. So therefore, I know you would not want to come in here and interpret for the students. So I say things in a nice way just to kind of enlighten people sometimes if it does get to that point. Most of the time, I don't have to. But if I do, I try to say things in a way that let the person know that I would never disrespect you in your role. And usually that helps them get the understanding of, oh, I don't want to disrespect them in their role as well. So the goal is to keep our roles separated and to respect each other in the position for which we've been hired. So I stay the educational interpreter, they stay the teacher of the deaf. But we also want to be collaborative. I am very big on if there's signs that I'm working with something, I'll give them to the teacher of the deaf and say, these are the vocabulary, these are the signs that we're using while you're working together if you need them. Um, and the same aspect, if teachers come up to me and they're having an issue with a student, because teachers, even though it's not our role, they'll come out and say, oh, they're not doing good. They failed this test. Like, I don't want to know they failed the test. It's your department. But I will listen, and then in turn, I try to say things and direct them towards the teacher of the deaf and say, that might be a good topic to bring up with the teacher of the deaf because they could have some one-on-one interaction probably. And plus, they probably have tools that will help you in your approach to teaching this child because they are specifically trained to teach deaf students. So remember, we're supposed to be out there supporting each other. So keep that in the back of your mind while you are working and don't be afraid to recommend them. And even, people like thanks and people like praise. And so it's okay for me to build relationships with people by building them up. And when I talk to the teacher of the deaf, saying something like, thank you for taking the signs that I use and being willing to use those while you worked with them. Thank you. I appreciate that. It definitely makes my job easier. That makes them feel good too. So the more we support each other and lift each other up, um, the better of a relationship that we're going to have. Now, I don't like to deal with adversity for sure. I don't want confrontation. I'm not afraid of it, but it's just the least thing I want. I like a peaceful resolve. But if it comes down to it, unfortunately, there are going to be times when people need to be reminded of their roles, and that goes for the educational interpreter as well. If we're doing things that are outside of our role of what we're supposed to be doing, somebody needs to remind us of that. So if we have to go to a supervisor, then by all means, exhaust all your options first and then go to the supervisor if needed. All right, back to the basics. So the other presentation that I gave you guys went into this very in depth. So I'm just going to kind of breeze over this part because when you look at the other webinar, you're going to get a load of this. But I'm just, for the people that may not see both of them, I'm just going to go over this real quickly. And let's get back to the basics and how we can be viewed as professionals. And the basics are how I look, be on time, be part of the team and become proactive. And that means being a part of IEP meetings. The IEP meetings are something that we should be invited to. Here in Virginia, the Department of Education actually has a pamphlet that they hand out, and in the pamphlet it says interpreters should be invited to the IEP meeting, which is very nice, and it helps us a lot because there are still schools that try not to invite us, and it's nice to take something from DOE and slide that to them and say, oh, we're supposed to get an invite actually according to DOE. So it's very nice. Um, Grade level meetings. I will ask the teachers when I go in, what day do you have your grade level meetings? And once I find those out, I will usually, if I have a team and I'm lucky enough to have a team, I will say, how about we alternate? You go one week, I'll go the other week. And that way we'll see what's going on the team. And that's a great way to get information and be able to keep up with things. Um, Also, get on their email list. I get that right off the bat at the beginning of the year. And so when they get emails or send emails out to each other, I get the email too. And that is very helpful when just any information comes up. It could be a field trip or something that I've forgotten about, and then seeing the emails. And it's nice to be able to get that information or know the topics that they're discussing. So definitely get on their email list and be able to, you can share information with them that way too, which is very nice. All right, no cell phones. Again, I went over this in depth in the last webinar, so I'm just going to touch on it for this one and not go too in depth. You can watch that one if you want more thoughts on how to be respected in the profession. But there are many interpreters out there that work and they will keep their cell phones out. And we just need to be mindful that that is a distraction and that is a complaint. That's one of the biggest complaints that I've heard in of other people, of other admin. In our department alone, in the school district that I work, that was our biggest complaint for several years in a row. And I'm not going to lie, there's still some that do it. Because I am just because I'm presenting on these things, I know you're thinking, "Wow, I want to work for their district." And we do have a lot of great things going on. We do have teaming. We do would they give us the Chromebooks or an iPad. We do have very great things, but it doesn't mean that the interpreters are always behaving the way they're supposed to behave. So we are just like you all. We have issues too, but I'm always mindful of my own actions compared to everyone else's. So um, those are things that we want to be mindful of as well. Now, there are always exceptions. As I stated, there's if your daughter's going to have a baby or something, then definitely just let the person know in the room so that they'll be aware of what's going on. All right, so I'm not going into that too much in depth. As I said, it's in the other workshop. So we're going to jump into subbing for another interpreter. So it's that happens sometimes. Somebody has to be out and one of us has to go in and take over. Sometimes it's a freelance interpreter that will come in and have to take over. And we found in our district that it's very helpful to have a subfolder. And a subfolder is a folder that I actually kind of came up with it years ago in my district. And it's a place to keep all the information, like all the information that you have, such as it could be the daily schedule, it could be the map of the school, the outline of the class and the things being taught. I'll put notes in it. The bell schedule, the lunch schedule, names, anything, the teacher's name so they can look back to it. It's so helpful if you go into a room and maybe you're the only interpreter in that room and you pick up a subfolder and you're like, oh, they're talking about fractions today. Good. Like it just helps giving that little bit of information. And even, if I'm into it and then I've forgotten the teacher's name soon as I get there because I'm horrible with remembering names. So I'm like, oh, okay, I can look back in the subfolder. Oh, okay, this is the teacher's name. And we know when it comes lunchtime, we want to eat just as much as the rest of them. So we're trying to look, when is lunchtime actually? When am I going to get my lunchtime? So having that schedule on there is such a big help to be able to easily access that. A map of the school, where am I going? If I can't follow the student, if it's a high school class, we know those students, the bell rings and that student is gone. And so then who's left? Me. And I have to maneuver and find my way through the school. So if I have a map of the school right there in that subfolder, it's so nice. So try doing something like that. We tend to leave ours in the mailbox, or if we'll leave it in the classroom where we work. If it's one of the high schools where you rotate around a lot, or if you don't have an office, yes, some interpreters have gotten offices in our district. It just depends on room availability. Right now, we don't have an office, but we have a file cabinet that's locked, and the principal got us that because again, we have a great relationship, and I was able to plead our case, basically saying we have paraphernalia that we have to bring, we have books for signs that we need to go back and check for specialized signs, computer signs, and all this, and not to mention heavy winter coats and things we have to carry around. And they were more than willing to get us a locked file cabinet, and so it's fantastic. Even the little things will help a lot. So we'll keep the sub book in there if needed, or we'll leave it with a teacher even and say, can you get it from this teacher, your first block teacher? She's going to have the subfolder. So those are some things to be helpful with. Now let's go on to when we do sub. When we are subbing for another interpreter, we really have to be mindful and respectful of how we behave. If I am the interpreter coming into that situation, then I need to make sure that I am behaving in a professional manner. There might be things that I see that I disagree with. So let's say I'm the type of interpreter that I go in and I stand at the front beside the teacher and I interpret. That is the type of interpreter that I am, honestly. But let's say you go into a high school classroom and there's a student in the front and they have a desk and they have a chair right up at the desk of the student. And now my gut instinct is telling me, oh, I'm just going to go stand at the front and say that's not the way that it's supposed to be done. So then what's going to happen is maybe that was done that way for a reason. Maybe they had to do that because they were trying to follow along reading on the story of Romeo and Juliet, and they were following themselves, and the interpreter was just there to direct them just in case they got lost on the page or something. There always could be a reason while someone is doing something. And remember, we're only there for a hot second. We're just there for that moment in time, and we don't want to go in and ruin everything that they have worked for. Now, you may walk into a situation that is not appropriate, and they're just doing that because they want to sit there. Again, we still don't want to try to change Rome in a day, because when you leave, they're still going to go back to doing what they were doing. And remember, if you are doing that, um, they're working with that teacher all the time, and you're working with that teacher for 1 minute. So if you leave, even if you're trying to set up a precedence to do it the right way, and this is what interpreting is supposed to look like, what do you think is going to happen? I can tell you what's going to happen. The teacher is going to say something to the interpreter and go, oh, she came in here and tried to change everything. And then they're going to talk about you probably behind your, and you're going to be the bad guy, even if you were trying to do something that's more appropriate. So, no, just it's not worth the battle. It's not worth the fight. If you're going to be in there for a long term, then fine, go in there and ease your way into changing things which are more comfortable for you. And I mean a long time by, a couple months. But if you're just going to be in there for a day or a week or 2 weeks, don't try to change everything that they're doing. There could be reasons for why they're doing them too, and they could be appropriate. So remember, if you left your current assignment where you're at and another interpreter came in and tried to change things for you, how would you feel if you went back? Personally, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't like it. I've taken a lot to work to get things the way I want them in the classrooms that I'm at. And I will tell you this, because I told you I'd share some personal experiences. And this happened to be year before last. I was working in an elementary school, and I had to take a day off for whatever reason. I came back the next day. Now, I had a team, so they didn't have to send anyone to cover me being absent. But the way our school is set up, or the way that student's IEP is set up, they had to have their lunch interpreted. So someone had to come and cover for the other interpreter so she could get lunch at some point. So it's a weird way that it's set up, but regardless, there had to be an interpreter that came for 30 minutes to cover a lunch. 30 minutes is all this interpreter came in to cover a lunch. That was the extent of her time there. When I came back the next day, the teacher across the hall, not even the teacher in the room that I was at, across the hall, came up to me and said, where were you yesterday? And of course, and I was like, oh, I was out. And she was like, yeah, how about that interpreter? Who was that they sent yesterday? And I said, oh, um, is, is everything all right? And she said, yeah, she was a real piece of work. Now I ask you, what can you do in 30 minutes to become a real piece of work? Because I am respectful of my colleagues as well, I just smiled and said, oh, well, I'm back now. And so you don't have to worry, I won't be out again. And I didn't say anything else. I didn't ask any questions. I still don't know what she did to be a real piece of work. But wow, this is the impression that we can make in 30 minutes of just covering an interpreter while they're out in 30 minutes. And that stuck with that person. That stuck with those teachers. So be mindful of those things. Don't be the interpreter that goes in and tries to change everything in one moment. Go in and do a job well done. Be friendly, leave, and take that with you when you go. Let's continue on. How about the code of professional conduct? Well, we also have to understand ethics when we are working in an educational setting. Too many people think that ethics, we know that we have to be an ethical interpreter, but we don't always know how do we apply that in the educational setting in a sense of we know it's there, but how can we be accountable for it? As far as my experience is with this, and I'm finding it's helping a lot to other people, I try to put everything and make it an ethical scenario. So if you've taken the NIC test, or if you plan on taking the NIC test, they have the interview questions that deal specifically with ethics. And they're going to give you a scenario, and they're going to tell you whether you're going to support this scenario, or whether this scenario you're not going to support this scenario, or you're going to support the interpreter's decision, should I say, because they give you the decision now. So what we need to do is think about the supports that I have, or the ethical situations that I face. I face ethical situations every single day in the educational environment. It could be something as simple as, let me give an example of, I'm in the teacher's lounge and the bell rings, and I really want to finish up my email that I'm sending, but I know it's going to make me a couple of minutes late to class. But it is an email that I really want to get sent out. And there's a team that's going to be there already. So now I have a decision to make. But before I make any decision, I need to go through the CPC. I need to think about all of these. I need to think of this one: conduct themselves in a manner appropriate to the specific interpreting situation. I need to think of respect for consumers. I need to think of respect for colleagues. I've just given you 3 examples of an ethical situation in order to support my reasons for not finishing the email and going to class. Too many times we leave that decision to either myself or my team and take the power away out, and we shouldn't do that. That's taking the power away from the deaf student, to be honest with you. But what we should be doing is thinking, is this an ethical decision? I can finish my email later during lunch. So this is not, I should have done this before school. I should have gotten here early to do this if I needed to do that. So we need to take time when we're making decisions that are going to impact our clients, and we need to think, how is this going to impact them? It could be working with a colleague. It could be, I want to reprimand this student because this student, and it's a hearing student, and we're like, this student is driving me crazy. And I am going to tell them that I'm going to move their clip down, or whatever it is that they have. But I have to go through some of these things. Sometimes I can find support for that. Sometimes I can find support in, at the beginning of the year, the teacher and I discussed, they wanted me to be part of moving clips down if it interfered with the interpreting process, not because they were over there cheating off Billy's paper, but maybe they were screaming so loud that I couldn't interpret. So I can move a clip of a student if that's the case. And these are things I'm just literally making up. But there are times that we can support a decision that we make. But we have to look at where is the most support coming from. In this situation, the first one with the email, the most support is coming from I need to be in that classroom and that's where I should be. So when we're working with ethics every day, no matter whether you're in the school system, whether you're at Sorensen or ZVRS or Purple or VRS period, freelance jobs, higher education, it doesn't matter where we're working. If we have a question in our head, the first thing we need to do is go through the CPC and think, where is my support for this decision? Now, if I have support for a decision, then okay, then when someone comes and asks me later, why did you do this? I can give the support for that decision. I can give support for not moving a clip down because that is respect for my colleague, respect for the teacher, because I don't want to interfere in her role, and her role is to discipline her class, and that's not in my job description. So there, I can support that decision. So be very mindful of that as you work, and you should be using the CPC. Print it out, have it with you, and when you are in doubt, go through and look and say, all right, this is what's going to support the decision that I'm making. Empower rather than enable. I am a big empower person. Like, I like to empower people. Um, the deaf student in a mainstream environment, they have to be able to do things themselves. They have to decide whether they want to participate in classroom activities, um, and they need to know that they are expected to join with everyone else, and they have to make those decisions themselves. And if they need help from something, it's not my job to help them with their work. It's the teacher's job. So I'm a big advocate of raise your hand. If they ask me, oh, how do you spell this? Raise your hand and ask the teacher. I'm not saying that there are never times that I do that, because there are. It depends on the situation. But I'm a very big advocate of empowering them to ask and build that relationship with that teacher. I also am an advocate of empowering in other ways too, such as I remember clearly I was working in a fourth grade class with a student, and the class was over and they had to go to the teacher of the deaf. And I usually, got up, packed my stuff, and it was across the school. So they had to, we ended up kind of walking together. For the first 2 weeks, I walked with them. And they had doors that are locked. And so they had to, like, I would unlock the door for them. Well, after about the second week, it was time to leave, and I noticed the student was standing in the hall, kind of pacing back and forth, waiting for me. So I looked at them and I said, "What you waiting for?" And they said, "I'm waiting for you." And I was like, "You can go yourself." And I signed that signed self to them. I was like, "Yourself, you can, you can." And the look on his face lighted up, like, myself? Like, I can go on my own? And he took off. He took off. And he got there, even though the doors were locked. And the reason, some people might be saying, well, you had the key. That's not, but my theory was other students were doing the same thing. So the teacher would send the student out of the classroom on their own to go to the nurse. The teacher would send the student to do something else on their own. Or sometimes it was the buddy system. So I would encourage the teacher when they said, you can walk with them to the nurse, right? I would say, well, what do you usually do? And we send them with a buddy system. And I'm like, how about we do that? Of course, naturally, I'm going to go to interpret, but I want them, they should be, not what I want, but they should be treated just like all of the other hearing kids. So the rest of the year, it was kind of hilarious. That student, when they knew it was getting time to leave, or the teacher said, all right, time to pack up, it was breakneck speed that they would pack up their bag and he would just run out the door. It made him feel good, and it made him feel like I can do things myself and I'm independent. And from there on, it was just empowering every opportunity that I could, rather than enabling. I disagree with enabling. I won't even give pencils to students half the times if they don't have them unless I'm willing to give pencils to the hearing kids. So there are some things that if a student says, do you have any paper? I don't usually have paper, so no. But if they ask for a pencil, I am usually willing to give the hearing kids a pencil too if I have it. So that I will give sometimes. But I am really mindful of how we get in a trap of I'm working with the student all the time. We have a cherished relationship, and we do. We are privy to things that their parents aren't even privy to. We probably spend more time with them than their parents do just because we're in school with them all day. But I have to be mindful of it. If I bring a snack in for the student, I'm not going to bring a snack in for the student. I'm going to bring a snack in for the class. That's a rarity too. But during a holiday when everybody's pitching in, I do. I bring little goodie bags for the whole class, and I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's building relationships and being part of the team. But what I don't do is bring in the student a gift and not the rest of the class. I make sure that if I'm doing something like that, I try to do it for all of them. Explaining our roles. Why do you work in teams? Because we're tired? No. So one of you can take a break? No. These are some of the questions we get asked quite often when I'm working as far as teaming goes. And you're probably thinking to yourself, how did you get teams in a school district? Because not a lot of school districts have them. How we got them is when advocating for teaming, it is never, you will never hear me say, so we can rest, because we're going to get laughed at if I literally say that. It doesn't matter how much my hands are moving and my arms are up during the day. I would laugh at someone if they said that, coming from a teacher who's standing on their feet all day long and who is working and using their voice and their arms to write on the boards. And then I'm going to say, well, we need a break every 20 minutes. No, 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 no. That will never come out of my mouth ever. And it will never. When did the teacher get a break? She's lucky to get it during lunch. If another teacher comes and checks the classroom for her, she can run. Yeah, I'm not going to say that. What I do say, and what is our interpreters say that has helped us get the respect that we want by having teams, is I say things like, have you ever heard of the No Child Left Behind policy? Well, we're trying to be compliant with that. That piques their interest right away. And they'll say, what do you mean by that? And then I have the opportunity to educate, which I love, to educate people who don't know anything about our profession. So now I have the opportunity to say, well, on my best day as a nationally certified interpreter, on my best day, you probably, by the end of the day, you're probably going to be getting maybe 85%, 90% if we're lucky, my skill. And they're thinking, I thought, you're certified, you should be. No. Studies have shown that after so much language transfer, after so much time, we start to lose the message and we don't even know we're losing the message. So, what the team is for, the team is monitoring. The team monitors, and when the teacher says something that I hear wrong because I've been going and I sign it wrong, the team monitors and feeds me the correct information so I can fix it. So, as before, if I didn't have a team, the student just got the wrong information. I didn't even know I did it wrong because I'm just interpreting and I thought I heard that, or maybe I'm getting tired and the concept that I signed was actually the wrong concept. I told them to do something rather than to not do something. So, and we can't monitor ourselves. So I tell them, if you put a team of interpreters together, then you're working closer towards 100%. So now we're getting 100% accuracy. No, probably still not getting 100%. Maybe I'm jumping there, but now we're getting closer to 100%. Whereas before, would you want your child, the best they can get on their test is maybe an 85, a 90 on a good day? Or do you want your child getting right there close to 100% accuracy? Because I have someone monitoring, and then when it's my turn, I'm monitoring, and we're feeding that information. That is what gets you teams. That is what gets you teams in educational interpreting. When we start learning to educate ourselves on why am I working? Yes, it's helpful it's mentally helpful. It's physically helpful to be able to be the interpreter monitoring. Of course, I'm still working. I'm still mentally working, But it is helpful to be able to do that compared to being there all day long. But when it boils down to it, it's not about me and my needs. That's why you will never hear me say, because I'm tired or I need a break. It's not about me. It's about the student. And it's about the student getting what they need and what they deserve. So as you move forward and you decide to advocate for teams, screenshot this. Take a picture with your phone of this exact PowerPoint slide and then work up a proposal for your school district and do some research and show them why. It took us doing this time after time after time. We did not get this overnight, and we still advocate for it to this day. But it did not happen overnight. We worked long and hard in order to get this to finally come down to where we have teams. All right, so remember I told you earlier about the crash course and working with a sign language interpreter, EI, educational interpreter. So this is the handout that we give teachers at the beginning of the year in our district. And it is very helpful when we are working in the classroom. Do they read it when I hand it to them? Not necessarily. But it does give me the opportunity later to come back when they ask me something like, can you run copies off for me? And then I can say, oh, interpreters aren't allowed to go leave the student to run copies. Did you read that crash course and work? And then they can, of course, go, oh, I didn't get around. Oh, that'll be very helpful if you do. But, since you haven't, yeah, in our job description, we have to, is language facilitation. Like we are here to make sure communication needs are met. So that's something that's helpful to do and have this as kind of like a little backup to give people. We have edited this over the years and we've kind of changed some things. And now our Department of Education actually has a pamphlet as well that we can hand to teachers. So yeah, kudos to Virginia Department of Education to listening and working on getting things done for us over the years. So this starts out with the sole function, and you like how we bold that one and italicize it because that is the function, is to facilitate communication between deaf and hard of hearing and hearing individuals. And our responsibility is to interpret everything we hear. And then it puts in the bottom there how we can't edit, delete, or change the message. Never ask an EI not to interpret something. And I've been asked it in the school system. I have definitely been asked, please don't interpret that. Yes, I'm going to interpret that. I interpret everything that you tell me. So this is one of those sheets that kind of gives us a little backup of, see, this is why we have to do that. We have to interpret everything, whether it be cussing out a teacher, which I don't want to do, obviously. It's not my goal in life to do that every day, but I've had to. I've had to do it many times. And I also know interpreters that have gotten called to the principal's office for doing that, saying, you're the adult, you should know better. Now, if that happens, a little heads up, and sometimes it has, what you need to do is make sure that you educate them that you cannot censor information because it's the student's right to be like any other student, and they have the right to get suspended just as any other student. Now, let's say that you've gone through every last avenue and they're still mad at you and they're trying to write you up. I highly recommend that you go home and you get in touch with people like your state chapter, your local chapter, or even the national chapter of NAD and ask for a representative because that is your resource. Having a deaf person from a local chapter come into your school and call a meeting and say, I'm sorry, are you trying to censor the deaf student? Are you trying to take away their rights? That's how we empower rather than enable. And that's how we give power to the deaf community, even if we're struggling trying to explain our role ourselves. So reach out there to your resources. All right. Now, it is because we are close with the student, they do automatically assume that we're responsible for the student's behavior. And this also reminds them that that is not the case. I say things to the teacher when I go in at the beginning of the year. I say things like, I would never disrespect you by trying to discipline anyone in your class. I would not step on your toes that way. And that way, that's telling them, I'm telling them that I respect them in their role at the same time as telling them I don't discipline students. So sometimes it's how we say it that comes across better because people don't understand that all the time. They think you're an adult, so you're good. And even at the beginning of the year, I draw a very hard line, meaning if the teacher asks me I've got to run to the restroom real quick, I will in turn say I cannot watch the students because and tell them why with this handout. We're not allowed. I could get in trouble from my own supervisor if I was caught watching students. And so when they get the hang of it, then they call the teacher from across the hall to watch them. Now, am I saying I've never like kind of kept an eye on a classroom? Usually I'm very hardcore at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, I have had teachers come up to me and go, I know you can't watch the class. I'm going to run across the hall and grab somebody and tell them to watch the class real quick. Mind you, the bathroom was in our classroom. So she was going to go across the hall to get someone to watch the class real quick while she ran in. It was just the bathroom. And I said, go, go. But the fact that she said to me, I know it's not your responsibility and you're not allowed, right there told me she knows my role. And now I'm a team player. Go real quick. Hurry up. Go. Don't even worry about it. Go real quick. I got you. You are going to respect me that much. I'm going to bend a little bit on occasion. So I'm not running to run copies off and things like that. But yes, you can run to the bathroom really quick in that sense. So be mindful of that. Um, Providing a deaf and hard of hearing student with EI does not give them the same access as the hearing students and that same experience. We tend to think that it will because in interpreters now they have that exact access, and it's not, because we're doing our best to provide that, and we interpret student conversations and we do all kinds of things to um, to make sure that their needs are being met, but and they're getting the full access, but there are still things that they're going to miss with an educational interpreter. And so we can't cover everything. If something happens while they're taking the test and their head is down and somebody does something, we might be able to describe it the best we can, but there are going to be things that are missed. So they do not have the exact same access that the hearing students have. And we're doing our best to provide that, but that's just one of the things that they need to be aware of. I also remind them, which we do this in the freelance world too, please direct your conversation to the student. I'm going to be behind you no matter if you're fussing or if you're teaching. Wherever you are, I am not going to be too far behind you. So direct all of your questions and talk to them directly. We also want to make sure that they understand when they hear our voice that that's the student's voice. There have been times when I'm sure you've experienced it too. Especially if a student doesn't voice a lot for themselves, or they do voice a lot for themselves, and then randomly they'll just decide to sign one day, and the teacher will look at you like, why are you interrupting my class? And then I have to remind them I'm voicing for them. So let them know at the beginning that if you hear my voice, it's going to be their voice. It's going to be them speaking. I am their voice in this moment. And usually by the end, you can figure out, they'll be able to identify whether it's you asking them, can you clarify that for a minute for me, compared to the student saying, do you mind telling me that again? And that it'll work itself out. But we just want to make sure that we encourage them to address the deaf student directly. Also, we have to let them know that if there are questions, there's going to be some responses that are going to be delayed because of the interpreting process. We are not right up on them all the time. And especially if they start playing games, you know how they play the multiplication tables. And if they play that and it's a game, I'm going to be behind. So the deaf student's not going to be able to raise their hand in time. So we would figure out, and that's being part of a team. We work together and we would figure out ways to do that. One of the teachers, she was so wonderful, and she realized what was going on. So what she did was she just got flashcards, the big flashcards, and she would stand them up in two lines going down the, like, behind each other. And so it was basically two students challenging each other at the same time. And she would flip the sign. So there was no like you had to wait or a delay. They both saw it at the same time. And it was a matter of seeing the deaf student put their hands up real quick. They had their hands already up or signing a number and just catching that number. But she could then see their hand, even if she didn't know what the sign was, she could see that their hand made a shape compared to the voice coming. So she knew how to say, oh, no, you, oh, no, you. So it worked out really well. So remind them of that because you never know when you can work together to come up with some solutions. All right. Uh, Proximity, we're obviously going to discuss that and working with the teacher and explaining that they can't look at us and look at aids that are visual aids at the same time. We want to make sure that they know that, and this document covers that. We also want to follow the IEP when it comes to seating and access and lighting. We also want to be mindful of the taking the notes and looking up at a movie. Sometimes I know in college situations, they'll have note takers that come. So that's kind of a nice thing too. But we don't necessarily get that in K through 12 settings. Some do. I don't know, whatever your school district does. All right, closed caption, if that's on the IEP, we want to be mindful of that. I try to tell them in a way, some teachers will just put on movies all the time without, oh, I couldn't find caption. Oh, I couldn't find caption. And I try to remind them in a nice way. I'll say things like, oh, I don't mind interpreting. That's what I'm hired to do. I just don't want to be out of compliance with the IEP. When you say words like that to teachers, that gets their attention because they know that what that means is they're out of compliance. So that makes them try a little harder to get the captions. And I still interpret if there's captions anyway, unless it's middle, upper middle, or high school, or it even depends on high school. It depends on what the students want. So, and we already talked about the teacher of the deaf and referring them when needed for information. There's the resource teachers, and that's a great resource. That was mentioned in the slide before. And then I do mention, and we mentioned this at the beginning of the workshop, that we work with the Code of Professional Conduct. If you have any questions about the student, ask them directly. And then we talk about how lip reading is not accurate. It's only about 30% effective. And there are funny videos out there that you can even use to support your point in that. So that's just a starting point for that. I'm going to go through this last few PowerPoints rather quickly. And these are things that we go more in depth if I do the whole day workshop. But I want you to think about perspectives when you're working with ethical decision making. I want you to think of identifying the problem, the people that are involved, and the impact. And it could be what happened previously compared to what's going to happen today and what the future impact is going to be on the decision that you make. Also, anytime you're working for an ethical decision and you're trying to figure what the decision should be, you want to take the Code of Professional Conduct. You also want to know what resources do I have that are going to support my decision? Or is it going to be NAB, EIPA? Or is it going to be federal law mandates or school mandates? And what tag words are going to help me discuss this with someone? The words empower, advocate, reciprocity, equality, those are the things that are going to help me support my decision. So I have a little scenario here that I just want you to think about and take this with you as you leave today. If you are giving you a little homework, I'm not a nice presenter, I give you a little bit of homework to take with you. So if you're headed off at a high school and your student heads off to speech, which is normally yours and your team's planning time, and the blood drive is at the school that day and ask you to donate blood, what should you do? Now, I'm not going to give you an answer to this, and I'm not going to even tell you what I would do. But what I do want you to think about is I want you to take that scenario. I want you to take the information that we've discussed today related to the ethics part, and I want you to come to a conclusion of what you think would be the ethical decision to make. Yay. How about that? You guys did awesome. I truly appreciate your attendance and watching my webinar. I hope to be able to come to your area and present this for a full day. It certainly is a hands-on one, and there's a lot more information to it. But I hope this gave you a taste of it, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And I look forward to working with you in the future. Take care.